With aurora and solar storms smashing the planet, media's having you look at the pretty colors all the while. That record cold event 2 months early got swept under the rug, so let's review it. Record cold all the way down to Miami. Iguana whisperers, anyone? Now, you could be having a bad day, but in perspective, I think not so much. But the planet being smashed by CMEs, auroras all the way down to Florida. There's been record cold down to Florida, but you're not hearing about it. They want you to look at the pretty colors in the auroras, which I'll bring you tomorrow's video. Incredibly beautiful, but starting at the record polar vortex swinging down. Lock that in for you. Right around 15,000 feet, it was 40 Celsius below zero, which is a negative 40, which caused those ground temperatures to, well, get chilly. And what's interesting is as it moved offshore, creating this pattern of ice crystal clouds, which you normally see along the North Pole boundary. But hey, with the Earth's magnetic field collapsing, anything's possible these days. And from one system to another, double arc storms in a row, actually triple, going to be hitting the West Coast. British Columbia, Seattle, all the way down. Hold on, this is going to be a barn burner, as they would say in the South. But the migratory birds in slow motion in the skies is a normal part of this time of the year, as well as, well, oranges, reds, yellows on the trees as we get into autumn. But not normally a super freeze at this intensity. Hundreds of records were smashed or broken all the way through the Southeast US, going back 100 or more years. Very little coverage about this. Local news picked it up. Obviously, they had to. They had to warn farmers, warn those people, bring in your pets, that sort of thing. We here in East Tennessee plunged down to 21 Fahrenheit, which is what you get in the depths of late January. So the full event ran from the 9th through the 11th, and you can see the depths of the center cold there. And we're looking at degrees Kelvin on the right of the chart, pegged as far as you can go cold. We're below 270 Kelvin. As you see that white area over Upper Peninsula in Michigan, all the way down into northern Indiana, South Bend. And that exceptional cold plunge coming all the way down into Texas, Louisiana, the same places we saw last year with the record snow. So I couldn't believe Washington Post picked this up off of Bend Knoll, where the temperature was below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, below freezing. Water stops, turns to ice everywhere. It's blue. That's an enormous amount of East Coast coverage. So the numbers here for you. I'm down in East Tennessee where it says 23, a little bit south of that. It was actually closer to 21, at least where our town registered at. But the bone chill from the evening of the 10th into the 11th, these are the coolest temperatures. And I want you to focus down into Florida, as well as right along the Gulf Coast there, up into Louisiana and Texas. Follow the yellow inside the Gulf of America, all the way over there if you don't know where that is. But this shocked even those in Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin is no stranger to snow, don't get me wrong, but they were shocked. It was beautiful one day in the high 60s, then whoosh, and they got, about a foot of snow. Imagine near late summer conditions, and then you wake up to this and have to get the snow shovel out. That is exactly like that car going down the stairs. Oh, it's going to be one of these types of winters. Get ready, the snow plows. The Fed's out of options, rate cuts, money printing, balance sheet reversals. They call it policy, but it's really panic. This is the end game economics, where hope replaces discipline and the illusion of control finally breaks. They're not cutting rates because things are strong. They're cutting rates because the system is cracking. The labor market's stalling. Confidence in the dollar is fading fast. For decades, the Fed built a house of paper. Now they're striking the match that could burn it down, leaving you to pay the price. Every cycle ends the same. Bubbles, bailouts, and broken retirements. That's why smart investors are moving to what's real. Gold and silver. When's the last time you actually held the wealth you've spent your life working for? My friends at Noble Gold Investments have been helping Americans move from paper wealth into real, tangible assets. Numbers on a screen can disappear, but physical gold and silver, that's lasted through every single crisis in history. Go to 2030gold.com and get your free wealth protection kit today. That's 2030gold.com. Click on that link in the description box below and discover how easy it is to protect your future. And for this holiday season, when you open a qualified account with Noble Gold Investments, you'll receive 10 1-ounce commemorative silver holiday coins, limited edition, and a joyful way to celebrate the season and invest in something real. Well, I guess it's not as bad as the speed cameras in Norway now, is it? Yeah, take that with your morning coffee and commute. We're going here in the States soon. Back to the temperatures, anomalies, meaning the difference from the 30-year average. The very light purple centered over, well, East Tennessee, North Carolina, Western North Carolina, into northern Georgia, that whole area there, way over on the right. Degrees Celsius, we're looking at 20 Celsius, which is about 28 Fahrenheit below. And since we were talking about New York as well, getting into the chilly action, this is Niagara Falls, 1911, frozen solid. So these are repeating cycles. And as we see, we go through the heating and the cooling. 1970s was a very cold decade as well. So was the 1950s. Now, prior to that, we come into the Dalton minimums at 1815. That was an actual proper grand solar minimum. And if we step a little further back, the Maunder minimum in 1640, where temperatures were remarkably colder than they are today, just on a planetary average. We've been consecutively warming, stepping out of these grand solar minima. But within that, there's variances as well, where we get centennial minimum. That was right around the turn of from 1899 to say 1900. That era was cool as well. Lower solar activity. I know we just got a lot of solar activity, CMEs, blast, the aurora, all these things. But it's almost like when an engine is running out of fuel, you get that last boom. If you used to have the older cars that, say 1979, I used to have this old 76 Jeep Cherokee. And if you ever ran out of gas, it gave you that last really like ramped up and then boom, and you knew you were completely out. And that's what happens when you have a broken gas gauge. But anyway, I digress. Is it the last ramp up in solar activity before we drop substantially off through into 2030 and it gets icy and our crops are affected? Is this really what's happening? You might ask yourself, with all the changes we're seeing in the world, and everybody's pointing to 2030 as sort of a timeline in stone, literally. Is somebody have this foreknowledge of cycles coming in where our crops are going to get knocked out at the knees? I talked about this 6 years ago when we thought that this was coming into this grand solar minimum period of this present solar cycle, not the next one. One too early, I guess. Same rules apply. Governments would react. Governments would start to ration food, all in preparation for lower crop yields, more civil unrest, and the change in the structure of governments and the way the citizenry is overseen. Match any world events and kind of world we see today? Oh yeah, it certainly does. We are absolutely in chapter 2 right now, moving forward with the changeover of the economy and the access to food. I encourage you to look at what Tesco in the UK is doing. They are now limiting the amount of foods that you can buy in terms of you can't go from one store to another and continue to purchase. Their algorithm now locks you out. You used to be able to do that. There's also in-store limits like we saw during certain chapters of 2021 and 22 when people were running in and buying everything. So why would they start to do that now unless they know there's another major event coming in and it's already going to be store policy set in stone, like you're already going to be locked in? I call that digital rationing. It's going to be on a digital rationing card, but they're already starting to set up ration limits in Tesco in the UK. Highly encourage you to look at that. So it's just telling me somebody knows something. And if we do go into a cooler phase, lower solar activity, magnetic fields declining off a steep cliff, as you see the weather patterns around the world, precipitation's out of whack, seasons are unusual, birds, animals, whales, anything that navigates magnetically is in the wrong place. Humans are behaving strangely. Well, that would make sense with a declining magnetic field because the lobes in the hemispheres of our brains are magnetic. So you've heard me talk about that before. But it does seem for me we're at an amplification phase. And this is just one of it. These CMEs rolling in, that's where all the news is. These record cold events, not widely talked about, but it is something. Let's take a look at the numbers. And this was the early tally of just they called it smashed records, which were over 80 of them. Smashed records had to be, it was a 5 to 7% variance over the last record temperature. So if your last cold record temperature was 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you came in at like 36, that's a 10% difference, right? That would have been a smash on the record. So anywhere you see these daily record lows, tied the record lows, smash the record lows, and off to my farm. Yeah, the wind's coming from the north. It's hitting the wind to the south, and then it's like vortexing around, which is, I don't know. Don't usually see that in the rain because you can't. It's too dense, but this is how the snow's moving today. A bit unusual, I must say. And the orange leaves and yellows and reds are still out in the forest with the snow, and that's not normal. And we're looking for probably about, I don't know, 2 inches today, looking out in the back field. But I just don't know if it's going to stick. Up there doing a little logging with the Amish. I don't know if you can see the logs too. Well, you can barely see them up there. But this is the back. I'm back looking at the house here. For those of you wondering where I live, this is the back of the property looking up the mountain. We got those few acres in the field and forest, and obviously the front 3 acres clear for some of the orchard. But incredibly early snows and dense and heavy. Raspberries over on the left over there. I need to work on those, but little raspberry patch. And that was happening the very day that you see the anomaly in the 500 millibar temperature anomaly over that area. Again, Tennessee gets wet, heavy snow, and you know these continue to come in. They're well over 140 records already, but this is just the verified 80 new record lows all the way down in the south. The blues are what they call the smashed records. So we look at the minimum temperatures here, and I want you to gaze your eyes way down to southern Florida, and that's in the 40s, 45 or so. Miami getting chilly, but everywhere else north of that where it gets even pinkish, that's well below freezing. This is in the same areas last year that had record snowfall across all the beaches. Same areas. So you have to wonder, second year in a row, is it setting up a new weather pattern we're starting to see? Because I will bring you back to this moderate minimum temperature reconstruction map. And that blue striation in the middle going from Alberta all the way down through the grain belts of the U.S. kind of slides into this same area with displacement. So you would expect on the periphery of this some strangeness in terms of this is a weather pattern that locked in for some 30 years. So over to pivotal weather. Those of you who love wind chill, 39, Miami, Cape Coral, 34, even way over in the Bahamas, only in the 50s. Yikes, going there for a holiday. And again, the National Weather Service, they circle it when that pings onto a verified new low record temperature. And we can start to see there are quite a few of them. So let's jump over to Miami, 48, tying the old record low in 1913. Apparently records go back to 1895. So we're getting back over 100-year record. Punta Gorda, new record low, Naples as well. So if you're starting to look at the ones that seem to be a little bit more intense, like Lakeland, that's a 10-degree difference in the record cold. St. Petersburg, again, that's something that's a 10% difference. That would be in the smashed category for an example, perfect example. Where Sarasota was only 1 degree, that would just be labeled as a new record temperature, not a smashed record temperature. But Brooksville from 37 down to 30, yeah, there's not such a category as ultra smashed, but close enough. But I would like to point out, during the moderate minimum, and I know people have heard me talk about this before, referencing the Seminole Indians, the Seminole First Peoples, talked about when it snowed in Florida year after year after year, the Everglades froze over every year for about 15 years in the mid-1600s. They called it the Great White Rain. They actually had a name for it called the Great White Rain. Now, the Everglades didn't freeze super thick like they would in the Great Lakes, but they got glazes of ice over them every year for about 15 years. So think about that for a second. So we've already gone through this pattern. And the question is, are we returning to this pattern? And if we are, then what's causing the return to that same pattern after 400 years? Do you think? Oh, the big yellow thing off to the left over there. Probably. Coldest in years, Tampa International. Old record low was 40 in 1892, 133 years ago. Bam, 38. We'll take it. Centennial plus plus. And then we look at Orlando, Dayton, Melbourne, Sanford, Leesburg. Again, pointed that one out. And Vero Beach. Previous record 44, new record 40, smashed. That's a 10% difference. You know, they don't really put them in the category as they should because this is such an anomalous event. But how many of you heard this covered in the news? Barely in the national news, they had to, because a lot of these airports were getting snow and cold temperatures. You knew there were going to be massive delays. The government was shut down, plus all the snow. So they had to warn people in advance that there were going to be some craziness in the skies if you're going to be flying. So it was there one day, gone the next. Like, they're definitely not going into depth looking at these. Birmingham, Alabama, Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Gadsden. Records, and we come through to some mostly even on that, but you get into Mobile and Alabama and Pensacola down there and Panhandle in Florida. Again, new records set. Mobile, you know, you're looking at 3 degrees difference on that. So that's a 10% variance. It falls within that category. Nobody's really pointing these categorized record temperatures being set as such. Oh, there's new record temperature. So Huntsville, Alabama, 21 Fahrenheit. That's the same temperature we got to here in East Tennessee. I showed you the snow. We got out of the backfield, front field. Previous record, 1926, 22. That's just a new record. Slidell or Sleedell, however you like to say it, Louisiana. Old record was 34, new temperature record 29, or even if you want to go in the evenings, whatever time you were looking at, they smashed the record multiple times. And jumping over to Climate Reanalyzer, the hottest, warmest data on the net. They run the hottest models, so newspapers love them. Media publications love Climate Reanalyzer. They sure don't like University of Huntsville, Alabama. Dr. Roy Spencer's site, a little bit different. I encourage you to compare those 2 temperature data sets and see, like, scratch your head. 20 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. You've seen already that's far, far, far cooler than that. Again, it's running warmer. And 30 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. I haven't really checked those up in Newfoundland and up in the Arctic Circle there. Probably a little down a bit. But if you continue, see it says 30 Fahrenheit, just go over and you see that next blue blob up there. That's northern China. Let's go over to the blizzard occurring there. And you'll see they're getting it as well. Now, this was a ski resort and people going up there, but it was so ferocious and came in so thick, so heavy, caught people off guard. They just were not ready for this, even though the forecast said, yeah, it's going to be some snow and this sort of thing. It is, well, beyond what the expectations were. So we're getting it in 2 parts of the planet. Hot, cold. And then there's been another sudden stratospheric warming event displacing. I mean, they're talking about record amounts of cold air getting punched out of the Arctic, but it's going to be going over Europe, Southern Europe, and in Northern Africa. So keep your eye on this over the next week or so as that cold air starts to transit through. I'm talking Egypt snow, kind of snow on the Sphinx kind is the displacement level that they're talking about. Everywhere we look, there's just incredible, incredible records going on of atmospheric displacement, magnetic field declines, solar activity with these X flares now coming off again and again and again and again, and then the solar winds and the coronal holes. It's something that is showing that we've entered into a new phase of intensification. The winds are stronger globally. We're starting to see that everywhere. The hail, the force of the hail, the size of the hail, the density, the weight of it is just record breaking after record breaking environmental event, whether it's the drought where it just, I mean, you see those drought stones coming off some of the rivers that haven't been seen in hundreds of years with messages written down. This is the last drought. It was 1801. This last time it was this dry. I know we got different irrigation projects and waterworks and things, but still, everywhere across the planet, it is becoming, well, let's say extreme. But again, I want to ask you, if your governments of the world working in tandem, how would you handle this? Would you tell the citizens? Would you make excuses for things that are happening that are just facades? Would you try to control the food supply? Would you get people ready to have a controlled food supply? And if you did, how would you do that? There has to be some pre-training with that. Put that in perspective for a second on the world we're seeing around us. The world we're seeing around us does not make sense. Why it's changing so fast, why almost everything is changing so fast. There's no more gradualism in it. The world we used to see was sort of a gradual change, and it wasn't everything at the same time. This time it is all of it, everything, exactly at the same time, exactly at light speed. So there's something different going on with the mechanisms of this date being reached around 2030, and it has nothing to do with the sustainability goals. Those are the excuses of why things are being put in play right now. But what is it that everybody's preparing for? Comet Atlas coming in as an alien craft? I don't know. I'm still way deep on the fence until I see something other than what looks like a comet for me. There's some plasma tendrils coming off of it that are taking on more of a star shape. If it comes around and you get the star tendrils coming off of that right around Christmas, well, could that be the North Star that was referenced in the Bible many thousands of years ago with the birth of Christ, and it returns again, and we see this glowing object in the heavens with what appears to be literally a star in the day with plasma arcs coming off of it in a star pattern? Yeah, that'd be a little bit, well, end time-ish, wouldn't it? So these are things to put into context when you're looking at the everyday news feeds, or why everything must change, and you're being told it has to change. But again, every time, please ask, why is this happening? There's something deeper behind it in the speed, and they're making mistakes and tripping over their feet and pushing this so fast that they just don't care. Our infrastructure is not being fixed any longer. So for me, that means there's a shelf life on it, that at the end of whatever chapter this is of our civilization / society, stepping over that line into the next chapter, whatever previous infrastructure was here is not going to be used in the new world for the best term. It's not been repaired. It's crumbling. It's not been repaired, and they know it won't be repaired. So that's another clue. Like, they're letting everything go infrastructure wise. What else is happening? Oh, the money needs to change. We need to go from physical paper into digital. Okay, why? And everything's moving over to a new system to be ready for all these changes. But what are the changes that are intended or known on these cycles to recur, return, and are happening to a point where it'll be uncontrollable after a few more years? Because the speed we're going now, if you've noticed and have taken notes since 2019, the amount of change we've seen since that time in the beginning of COVID, late 90, or let's say call the beginning of 2020, until now, this 5 years of change is greater than like 50 or 70 years of change in previous chapters of our history, perhaps even 100 years squeezed into 5 years. Things rolled a bit slower. So we're getting this compression of time, or seems to have sped up. A lot of people are noticing that, but the compression of events at this breakneck speed, like I said, tripping over their shoelaces to get things done, obvious as can be. Don't even care if you spot it. Everything's just going fire sale or no repair. Hey, if it's free, give it away. And then that's the world we're left with, and we're just supposed to figure this all out on our own over here. It just doesn't make sense. Something larger is here. And this is only just like one little tiny facet of a diamond that you're looking at of this record cold of just this year's anomalies. But no, look at the pretty colors. Don't look at the record cold. You're going to start asking questions about this. Why did it occur? What knocked that air mass out of place? What displaced it? Oh, wait, we got another one even larger than this one. But luckily, it's this time it's going over northern Africa, and nobody's questioning why this heat, these high pressure systems are going to suddenly start knocking everything off. We are going to have an incredibly cold winter, because the next one, as the forecasts go out, they're getting pretty good at this on the modeling, even months out. After this displacement event collapses in on itself, when we get that cold air coming back, there's another displacement event about 30 days out from here that's going to knock that off again over Asia, and it is going to spin through back over to North America again. That would be, let me see, December. So right around Christmas time, it's going to get incredibly cold again with a second displacement event over North America. We have this displacement event, a record cold heading right over Northern Africa. I'll be just shocked to see how people handle it and what the images are going to be coming out of some of the oldest sites on the planet that are now desert, that used to be forest, coming back into freezing conditions, record rains, and now starting to green again. You know, these are the types of changes we're talking about. Massive, multi-thousand-year cycle changes. So anyway, that's all. Thanks for joining. I hope you got something out of the video. Please visit our sponsors, vni.life/civilization, Trim Rocks and N-Sorb, the gut bundle for you. That link's in the description box below. And please support us, buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle if you like information like this. And until next time, bye for now.